Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to our next briefing. Everyone, please find your seats in the briefing room, and we will continue. Classification level of this briefing is, of course, unclassified, as this is on YouTube. The original subject of the first brand new content on this channel was going to have to do with the Soviet-era designed MiG-29 Fulcrum and the Su-27 flanker family, and that video is well underway. However, somebody asked a question that was very relevant and very good, and I feel like we should address that. Maybe that should be the first video here. And that is, what's a tactics talk? Why is the channel named Tactics Talk? And you know what? I feel like that bears relevance, and maybe we should establish that first, and we can roll from there. And I promise the Fulcrum flanker video will be rolling right along. It's just about done. But the opportunity to discuss this and kind of tell this story is very valid, and it makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense to have this roll out earlier than other videos. And I think you guys might enjoy a little bit of the history lesson here. So we're going to do that. So what's a tactics talk? It's a real thing. I didn't make it up just for the channel. It's a formally informal training event that takes place in every United States Air Force combat coded unit every Friday afternoon without fail at the end of the duty day, and it has a very, very specific purpose. But in order to understand how that works and where that goes, we need to go back in history a little bit. We need to talk about something called the United States Air Force Weapons School. We need to talk about how the United States military operates and how it's very different from what you see in movies and TV. And this is not just the Air Force, this is the Army too. This is the whole thing as a whole. We need to talk about one of the key things that sets the United States military apart from other countries. One of the things that kind of makes us a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit more effective, and that is our training. You can have all the fancy weapon systems, all the best electronics in the world, but if your troops aren't well versed in how to use that and don't keep abreast of the latest developments, what the other guys have, even what friendlies have, and what's going on, and the latest in how to employ all those fancy weapon systems are useless on the battlefield. And I think we've seen that going on in a little place called Ukraine lately. So let's talk about a tactics talk. And let's talk about what it is and why it's really important. So whenever you see a movie involving a military base, for some reason, at any given point during the day, there is a formation of troops in full gear, mind you, in boots, just running in formation, calling cadence. There's always your random tank driving down the street, you know, or sometimes clear across the grass. You never drive an armored vehicle across a general's grass. You will not enjoy the consequences. It gives the impression that nothing goes on any base besides 24/7 G.I. Joe style training. And that's just not true. I love it when civilians, people who have never served in the military, ask me, what's it like? You know, what's it like being in the Army or the Air Force or both? And I tell them, you know what, seriously, in peacetime, when you're not deployed, when you're not on a training cycle, it's kind of a 9-to-5 job. Well, it's a 7:30 to 4:30 kind of job. Those are the standard duty hours of the United States military. Now, it may vary from base to base and depending on what kind of duty cycle you're on and what kind of unit you're in, but the United States military is open for business from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., generally speaking. And within that, there are plenty of offices, because as much as the United States military functions on training and combat, it functions on bureaucracy and paperwork. Now, I'm going to speak from this point on. I understand that this really talks about all branches of the military, but I'm going to focus on the Air Force, because the tactics talk in that definition is an Air Force thing. But I'm sure, I know it takes place in all branches to one extent or another. But in the United States Air Force, in a combat coded unit, combat coded means that mission is designed, organized, and scheduled to deploy with weapon systems and turn enemies of our country into smoking piles of hair, teeth, and eyeballs. In every combat coded unit, you have the flights, and those are staffed with the general personnel that carry out that combat mission, right? But you also have what we call shops. Shops are offices. They're offices with staff that carry out various functions that make that squadron work. Now, I'm going to speak mostly about a unit I'm very familiar with, which is called the Control and Reporting Center, which doesn't sound like it does much. It's also known as an air control squadron. The reason I focus on CRC is because there are many types of air control squadrons, but only one type of air control squadron is a combat-coded field deployable unit. It's what we call battlefield airmen. We deploy on the ground. We are not guys that we don't fix airplanes. We don't do maintenance. We have some maintenance folks in the squadron, but our job is to deploy out. Front lines, us. We deploy out. We provide that tactical air control element. We designate airspace for our tactical players. We are on the radio with the aircraft, with the combat pilots. We are carving up parts of that tactical sky, almost like air traffic control, but in a much more high-paced, high-speed. Air traffic control has to follow FAA rules, and their job is to keep aircraft apart. Our job is to bring them together with ground targets, with air targets. We control aerial intercepts. We bring aircraft to tankers, and most importantly, in the last 20-year war we fought, we bring aircraft to air support taskings, to targets on the ground to make them blow up. There's a wide-ranging thing of what the air control squadron can do. Honestly, it fulfills so many functions, and it's actually a rung in the ladder of command and control. It does a lot, so please believe me, I'm leaving a lot out. I want to make this unit sound as cool as humanly possible, but I can never do it in a video less than like 3 hours long. So one of the things about this squadron is it is also staffed and trained to support and defend itself for up to 90 days out in the field. No help, no resupply, cavalry's not coming. Dig your foxholes, man your machine guns, create your own ECPs, build a barricade, convoy duty on your own to get out to where you need to go, and do what you got to do, and work with the ground commanders out there to make sure this mission happens. It's an amazing unit to be in, and I actually, early on in my Air Force career, we had a visiting high-ranking Air Force officer from a flying unit who looked at us and said, "Are you guys in the same Air Force that we're in?" And we were like, "Yep. We got you." It's pretty cool. And then, on the other hand, other combat-coded Air Force units, probably simplest thing that people think of is a fighter squadron, which, although very different from the unit I'm describing, is organized in the same fashion because combat-coded units have the same functions and they have to maintain the same kind of combat-ready standards. They just do it with different equipment. But it's the same kind of organization. Control and Reporting Center, the Air Control Squadron, has about 350 personnel split among 3 divisions: operations, maintenance, and mission support. So it's like a mini fighter wing all in one. Most fighter squadrons have the same kind of division, but what we're going to focus on is operations, what we call DO. So you have the unit commander, the CC, he's the guy on the top of the chain of command, and his immediate second in command is director of operations. They're in charge of everything that makes that mission happen. We also call them the DO. Now, people that fall under DO, Directorate of Operations, in a fighter squadron, they would be all your pilots. In our CRC, they're going to be all the operators. And when I say operators, understand operators that operate the combat equipment, not operators like secret squirrels running around in the night in black uniforms kicking in doors, okay? It's a term. It's not a designation of a job. It's operators versus maintenance versus mission support. So don't get carried away when I say we have 75 to 80 operators. It's not like that. It's operators that do the mission is what I'm saying. It's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to make it out to be more than it is. Just like in a fighter squadron, the lowest specific organization or designation of people you have are pilots. They are considered the operators of that aircraft, right? But for every one person in operations, you need significantly more folks in mission support and maintenance to make that mission happen. But we're not looking, not because they're not important and not because we don't love what they do, because they keep the mission happening. You can't do a combat mission without your mission support and your maintenance personnel. Equipment breaks. And you know what operators do? They don't call us operators, they call us oops troops, because our job is to break equipment for them to fix. Same thing with pilots. Oh, the amount of behind the back joking and talking about pilots from maintainers is hilarious. But we are focusing on the operations side of the house right now. And I know this is a long, windy, snaky road, right? But trust me, we're going to get there, because I need you to understand the divisions of labor here so you understand how we get to the tactics talk and why it's so important. I promise there's a payoff at the end of this rainbow. There's a little knowledge pot of gold waiting for you there. So within the Directorate of Operations, we have our flights. Usually they're listed A, B, and C. DOA, DOB, DOC. Depending on how big the unit is, you could have, like at my last squadron of assignment, which was a formal training squadron where we trained brand new second lieutenants to do their jobs, we had DO all the way to J, I believe. Yeah, and each one was a responsible for a segment of the curriculum, you know, different mission set. In a standard combat coded unit, you usually just have DO, A, B, and C. And that is really a logistical and administrative separation. So you have a flight commander, and they are responsible for a certain number of personnel that fall under them inside that chain. Some of your more experienced personnel in the unit don't live in the flights, they live in the shops. That's where they work on a day-to-day basis when they are not doing the physical mission of the unit. So it's kind of like a dual duty. So again, referencing a fighter squadron, every pilot has to fly that plane. They have to get their required hours and events. That's another whole Air Force thing. An event is maybe you have to do practice a fighter escort mission. Maybe you have to practice a close air support mission. Maybe every month you have to practice a search and rescue mission. So you not only have to have required flying hours, but a certain number of individual events to maintain currency, okay? But so not only do each of the pilots have to do that, or in our case, in our CRC, do we have to have events that we have controlled, that we have been on the ground with the equipment, talking to an airplane, you know, pilot, and directing them around and telling them who to blow up and where, or what piece of the sky to fly to, and then do this and fly here and, you know, do the hokey pokey and not hokey pokey into this dude over here because he's hokey pokeying over here, but whatever. But you have to have certain mission sets to maintain currency. And that goes towards something we call CMR, Combat Mission Ready. You cannot deploy and do your job if you do not maintain CMR status. It's so important, they give you a medal for it. There is a whole medal for maintaining CMR. And there's a whole medal for it because the military makes it so hard to do with all the extra crap they throw upon you every single day. We call it ancillary training. How to use a fire extinguisher, how not to become a terrorist, how not to let terrorists trick you into being a terrorist, how not to give information to terrorists, how not to misuse your computer, how to properly brush your teeth in the morning, how customs and courtesies. Like the list is ridiculous. By the way, then there's also the standard paperwork. If you are a supervisor of subordinates, you are responsible for doing initial feedback at the beginning of the rating term. Mid-course feedback, it's a written, you have to have a conversation telling them how they're doing, you have to do a written physical form, you have to do annual performance reports, and that is not just a one-time, hey, here you go, here it is. That is like a 3-month-long process of you writing, and it's got to be written in perfect Air Force-ese language, bullet statements on the form, to your supervisor, to their supervisor, to the chief of the unit, back down for corrections. I mean, it is ridiculous. You have to do administrative reports. You have to attend staff meetings. You have to attend wing level meetings. So on top of the squadron, you have group level, you have wing level. I mean, there is 1.5 million things to do. It is like working in a huge global corporation, in addition to your normal duties of killing and destroying the enemies of your nation. Maintaining CMR status takes a lot of time and practice. And by the way, just because you get the flight hours or the combat hours on the ground, mission hours, and just because you do the mission for the actual, let's say, events, you might not get credit, because if you don't do that mission right, there is another shop that evaluates everybody every so often and says, yeah, you're doing your job okay, or no, you're not meeting the standards that were set forth in training, you need to go back and retrain. Yay. The United States military doesn't just want people that can push button, get banana. They want people that are going to push button, get banana in the appropriate, tactical, well-trained, rules of engagement, best practices military way. And if you can't do that, you don't get to push button, you don't get banana. It's a big process. It's not, yeah. Some militaries are very robotic. They conscript you, they draft you, you serve a total of a year or 2 years, and that's it. And you get like zero training. And we're seeing what the results of that is with the Russian military in Ukraine right now. And certainly nobody wants the United States military held to that standard, right? No military in the world should be satisfied with that standard. So you can see why upholding standards is really important. So all these other shops around the flights, they're very important. One of them is called DOT, Director of Training. Those are the folks. So everybody's trained. They come from training schools, formal training schools. We call them formal training because they have established curriculum. They are designated by Air Education and Training Command to teach you how to do your job and sign off and bless. You can do your job. You earn wings. You earn badges. You earn career field AFSCs, which is the same thing as an MOS in the Army. That's a formal training school. In the squadron, DOT then teaches you how to do it and maintains the training on how to do it to combat standards. Very important. And some of your most experienced people go there. You can be an instructor in a combat coded unit. You don't just be an instructor in a technical school. Line instructors are very important to making sure that they have people to continue the education and training of folks that are in the unit. When somebody comes to the squadron brand new, you're never done with training in the military. It never ends. So these instructors, their job is to now take somebody fresh that is completed with training from a technical point of view and now get them to CMR status. That's what the instructors in DOT do. There's a shop called DOX. That's exercises and plans. Those are very experienced people whose job it is to help plan out all these fancy exercises and training events that we have that will keep us ready to go to war. One of the most important shops in any combat coded unit is DOW, Weapons and Tactics. It sounds a little vague, I know. Some people say it sounds like SWAT team. It's not at all. The Weapons and Tactics shop, it houses some of the most highly trained tactical experts in the squadron. Also, some of the most highly trained instructors in the squadron, and it has a very specific job. The reason I say it's probably the most important shop is because that was my shop. I was the Weapons and Tactics NCO for my squadron. It's staffed by the Weapons and Tactics officer and the NCO. Now, usually your Weapons and Tactics officer is somebody you call the Patch. They're called the Patch because they are a graduate of the greatest training establishment in the history of the world's military, the United States Air Force Weapons School. It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Very, very rarely a non-commissioned officer, not an officer, gets to go to the United States Air Force Weapons School. There are, in my class of 135 people, there were 6 enlisted men. And there are only, I believe, don't quote me now because things have changed, there are only 4 career fields that enlisted men and women can apply to go to the weapons school from. Again, it used to be called Battlefield Airmen, and now it's all under Special Warfare, is what all those career fields are listed as. There are only 4 career fields you can even apply to. The first challenge to getting to weapons school is even making it through the application and selection process. I know a class of 135 sounds like a big class. 135 people selected from the width and breadth of the entire United States Air Force. Inside the weapons school, there are 21 individual academic squadrons that cover 31 specific combat platforms. So any aircraft that flies in combat, the Air Force Weapons School has a program for them. And now they even have programs for cyber warfare and space warfare. So when you think of 135 selected out of a potential pool of approximately 1 million, that's not very big. All right, and not all 135 of those people are going to make it through the school. I can tell you that from my career field, 2 were selected, and the battle buddy I was going through with did not make it through the school. The weapons school really is, it is the jewel in the Air Force's crown, or one of anyway. It is for some a major stepping stone to important leadership positions. There are some positions in the Air Force where they will not even consider you if you have not graduated from that course. You're not even, it's a requirement. The weapons school was opened in 1949. In Las Vegas, Nevada. Well, just outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. In 1949, it was called Las Vegas Air Force Base. It would shortly become known as Nellis Air Force Base. In 1949, it was called Aircraft Gunnery School, and it was designed to teach advanced gunnery techniques to what would be the first crop of jet fighter pilots. It's a whole different world, shooting your guns at a target in an aircraft moving 500 miles an hour versus aircraft moving about 300 miles an hour in props. It would go through a point where it was called the Jet Fighter School, which is pretty much self-explanatory. And at that point, it was very exclusively geared towards pilots. Let's face it, the Air Force only cared about its pilots at that point. It really did. It was a very pilot-centered Air Force, and I'm not going to say it's not today. It is run by the fighter mafia. I mean, it is. But it was really all about teaching pilots how to shoot things. And that was like the only focus they had. Now, this might sound a little similar to Top Gun, which is much more well known because it had a blockbuster movie made about it, as inaccurate as that movie was. There's a lot of differences between Top Gun and Weapons School. For one thing, Weapons School is better. Boy, that pissed some people off. They both are designed around building tactical experts and expert instructors. Weapons School, from my point of view, obviously I didn't go to Top Gun. However, we had a Top Gun exchange instructor in my course teaching us. United States Air Force Weapons School is longer. There's a lot more in-depth with joint mission planning, a lot more in-depth with tactical knowledge on other systems besides your own platform. And they have different purposes. They flat out have they have different purposes. The Air Force operates a much wider variety of systems to bring to bear than the Navy does. And I'm not going to go, this is not a Top Gun versus Weapons School, but Weapons School teaches a lot of stuff that Top Gun doesn't. Top Gun also teaches stuff that Weapons School doesn't. I mean, they're not sister competitive schools. They're not sister service rivalry schools. They suit the purposes for their specific services, but Weapons School is a whole different environment. Weapons School is a total of 23 weeks long, which doesn't sound that long when you think about it. It's 23 weeks of sleep-deprived, top secret or higher knowledge coming at you at a fire hose, mixed with actual tactical mission execution, a heavy dose of mission planning, and if you can't keep up, you just can't keep up. It is not uncommon to have 36-hour-long days in Weapons School. That is from the time you wake up, mission plan your event, brief your event to the instructors, execute your event, and then debrief your event with your instructors. And debrief is what, that's where people lose it in Weapons School. And the whole point of debrief is then to identify what went wrong, what your desired focus points are for the next mission, and your learning points of what could be done better, and how are we gonna do this. Nobody gets through Weapons School without failing a mission. Nobody. It does not happen. It is impossible. And the idea is you fail to learn. Not that you fail to learn. You fail missions to learn for the next mission. There are integration missions where all the systems come together, where we have more than 100 assets in the sky at one time, and including guys on the ground doing their job on the ground, calling in air support, organizing the fight in the sky. It is an amazing environment. You learn more sometimes in your 23 weeks at Weapons School than the rest of your career combined. There are amazing lectures by incredible instructors. We had a lecture by Gail Peck, who, if you're not familiar, was one of the guys who created the Red Eagles program. He created Constant Peg, one of the guys, which is where we collected MiG aircraft from around the world and then tested them, exploited them, and then secretly, for decades, brought our pilots into the Nevada desert and flew them against actual enemy aircraft to train them. And it just incredible learning environment. The point is not to make 135 really smart dudes and dudettes in a room. The point is to make 135, well, I don't know, about 100 by the time the course was done. The point is to make 100 really smart dudes and dudettes that can take those skills back to their home units and then start sharing some of that knowledge with the rest of their squadrons. Now, obviously, you're not going to share every single technical bit and beep and squeak, but the lessons learned on how to employ, on how to plan a mission, on how to integrate Platform A with Platform B. Hey, we've got B-52s and we've got F-22s and we've got F-16s and we've got these dudes on the ground to call you into your targets. What's the best way to put them together in a package and how to employ them out in the field? Hey, here's new technology that's coming off the line. How can we integrate that new technology into the technology we already have? Here's a way to think outside of the box next time we need to pull off a cool daring mission. This is some of the mindset you learn at weapons school. And it's the job of those instructors, those tactical graduate instructors who earn that weapons school patch, which is why we call them patches. It's their job to share that within their home squadrons for life, no matter where they go, and to assist in that kind of education. There's a difference between training and education. Training is very two-dimensional. If A, then B. This is what the Air Force says. Education is teaching people knowledge to employ wherever they go for the future. DOT worries about the very specific things the Air Force says you have to do in this platform, in this environment. DOW is worrying about the bigger picture, is worrying about keeping all of our folks abreast on what we can do, what the bad guys can do, and how we fight them. What is the latest? So once you're in that DOW, once you're in that weapons officer or NCO world, it never ends. There's follow-ups, there's conferences, there's an information chain that's constantly coming down. And having had very advanced read-ins to several programs, you have a knowledge base that other people don't have. And you become a train the trainer. Your job is to make sure that other instructors know some of the advanced techniques that you've learned at weapons school about how to teach. Weapons school, if nothing else, is also about how to teach. As you're getting your junk kicked in for 23 weeks and learning how to operate with no sleep and learning how to operate with zero morale and being told how everything you're doing is absolutely wrong, what you're really learning is how to pass on that knowledge and how to be a better instructor, because everybody that goes, by the way, to weapons school has to have a certain time under their belt as an actual instructor, certified through either Air Education Command or Air Combat Command, or their specific area. It's all about learning and passing that knowledge on and teaching others. It's the most amazing thing I ever could have done in my career, and there's no way to do it justice just by telling you in a video. So if you're still with me, you understand now how we have these office specific assignments and kind of what they do. We're getting to tactics talks. We're getting there. So we are back in our combat coded, field deployable, war ready Air Force units. We still need to maintain that cutting edge and that most current combat information for our folks. That's DOW's job. We are always there to answer questions, number one, to make sure that anybody that wants to know, hey, I'm flying a mission today, a training sortie. My threat is a Su-30 SM. I'm not really familiar with that aircraft. I'm very familiar with XYZ. Let me come in and research a little bit about the Su-30, and we'll sit down and we'll be like, let me tell you all about that aircraft. That's our job. Like, let me tell you how it employs. Let me tell you what systems it has. Let me tell you how you can use your systems to do XYZ. Okay, what country is flying your Su-30 SM? Because different countries employ different tactics based on their experience level and their training standards. Who's your designated enemy for this mission? Oh, Algeria? Algeria flies Su-30SMs. Let me tell you what tactics they employ with so you can mission plan a defense against those tactics. Okay, cool. We're there to be the answer of all the unknowns as we can. We work hand in hand with the squadron intelligence officer, or NCO. We have both, an officer and an NCO to work on stuff, to make sure that all the unanswered questions that we can answer get answered, and to prepare these briefings for the squadron. So, POV, it's Friday. The squadron's been working really hard all week. We've done our training, we've cleaned our equipment, we're ready to relax just a little bit. It's about 1500, that's 3 p.m. for you that don't speak military or the rest of the world time. Commander's gonna say, hey DOW, you got a tactics talk ready for today? And we're gonna say, affirm sir, we got it, because DOW's always ready with a tactics talk with what's going on. Tactics talk is our chance to, like I said, formally, informally, sit down with our warfighters and present current information that educates them on what's going on. Updates, intel situation, what maybe we can't discuss on YouTube, but current intelligence organizations have gleaned over the last little bit about global hotspots in the world or technology. And we're also going to work hand in hand with DOT and with another office I didn't tell you about before called CCV. That's Standards and Evaluations. We're going to look for trends in the squadron that are going on right now. Maybe things that we can work on. Maybe there's a common error pattern going on that everybody's doing, or a great majority of people are doing. Standards and Evaluations, every year you have to get evaled to make sure you still hold your qualifications. Maybe StanEval is seeing a trend in mistakes being made on these qualification tests. So we're gonna work with them and we're gonna figure out like what is going on, what needs global education on the squadron. So 1500, commander's gonna say, yeah, we're ready, we're shut down, weapons are locked up, aircraft are locked up, systems are locked up, we're good to go. They're gonna release all of the non-warfighting personnel, so maintainers, mission support folks, maybe even the junior airmen who really aren't in on this big responsibility yet. They're just, they're doing a fine job, but they don't need to sit and get this information. They get to go home an hour early on a Friday, start their weekend and enjoy. But those who are, again, combat coded duties, they're gonna gather in the squadron briefing room or auditorium, whatever it may be. They're gonna grab their squadron stein. Those of drinking age are gonna go to the squadron bar. Sorry, heritage room. Not allowed to say squadron bar, heritage room. It's a bar, it's a really fancy bar. They're going to check that the commander has turned on the beer light. I'm not kidding, the beer light is no shit, it's an actual light. The commander will turn it on. We had a fantastic one at the 726 Air Control Squadron. The beer light on means that you can get yourself an adult beverage and relax, because again, all the equipment's locked up. We have no mission duties at this point. DOW is also responsible for making some of the greatest jalapeno popcorn in a professional popcorn maker, mind you, that you've ever had. You get yourself a bag of popcorn, you head on down to the briefing room or the auditorium. If you're underage, it's not required that you get an adult beverage, right? But once you're established in the squadron, you get yourself a squadron stein with your call sign on it so you can enjoy this. If you want, you can get a red Solo cup, whatever. Get whatever kind of beverage you so choose. You take your seat in the squadron and we begin our weapons and tactics talk, where we start the education process. Typically it begins with a brief by our intel people. So it is going to be classified either as secret or top secret, depending on where the information goes. And it's going then to move on. We're going to talk about our trends and our problems with DOT, with CCV. We're going to talk about what we can improve, what we need to improve, what our improvement goals are, and how we're going to get there with our operations. Then we're going to sit down and the DOW folks are going to talk about tactical problems out in the world. We are going to talk to you about enemy equipment. We're going to tell you, and a lot of this might be stuff that some people already know, but we're going to start with the very basics, say a flanker, Su-27 flanker, and we're going to talk about some of the advancements that a particular country is making in equipment, in capability. For example, this is not classified at all, of course, but when we saw the Russian Air Force, this goes back a few years, the Russian Air Force and the Chinese Air Force used to operate very strictly on ground control. Their pilots had no imagination. There'd be a radar station on the ground, and that controller would tell that pilot where to fly, how to go. Very specifically, did not deviate at all, because they didn't trust their pilots not to fly their plane to another country and defect. But it's a very inefficient way to fly, and it's a good way to get dead versus a country like ours, where our pilots are taught to be free thinkers, imaginative, control your aircraft in combat, follow the tactic that works in the situation, not some pre-canned, just listen to the dude on the ground who has no idea what's going on. We also use ground controllers who will give them the wide eyes view and direct them on the intercept. But once the pilot is in the visual arena, that's entirely up to our pilots. They're allowed to react as they need to win the fight and preserve their aircraft and their life. For a long time, Russian and Chinese pilots had no freedom to do that. Once we saw that Russia and China had changed their training cycles drastically to allow pilot freedom and pilot decision making, that was definitely worthy of a tactics talk to discuss what does this mean for their air forces, how is this going to affect their operations, and most importantly, how does that affect how we counter our air operations? What systems on the airplanes might they employ differently? How might they employ their weapon systems differently, and how do we counter that? That's what a tactics talk is all about. The reason I say it's formally informal is because it is not an air education and training command course. You're not sitting in a classroom, you're not taking notes, you're not going to be tested or graded on this. This is your designated squadron experts that have been to weapons school wearing the almighty patch, giving you information. And it is a give and take. You're free to ask questions at any point. Those with experience in the room, because remember, your patches very well might not be the most experienced warfighters in that room. They have been to the course, they've learned the techniques, and they've been read in on some high-level information. But that doesn't mean they are the expert in flying the aircraft assigned to that squadron. It doesn't mean that they are the most knowledgeable person. The tenets of weapons school are humble, credible, and approachable. Know what you know what you don't know, never be a dick about it. That's basically what it comes down to. So there's always the opportunity in a tactics talk for somebody in the room who has been there, seen that, done that, to share their view on it. Now, it doesn't always mean that they're right, because remember, personal experience doesn't always mean the technical right answer, but it definitely is worth talking about. I've seen a Russian system do XYZ. Well, let's talk about that. Now, I know you've seen this, but that is not in their doctrine. So you might have seen a one-off, and that is absolutely worth noting. And we should talk about that because that points to a capability that they have. But in combat, what we should expect is XYZ. But we never want to count out somebody that has seen them do something, because that definitely indicates that they are capable of doing something outside of their doctrine. That's important to know. So a tactics talk is a chance to gather everybody up, is a chance to go over new things that we might not know, reinforce standard things that we should know, talk about things in your unit that you might want to get a handle on, and relate that to the standards of weapons performance. Relate that to the application of combat, because that's what it all comes down to. How do we apply these things in combat? How do we relate them to the capabilities that we know we have? And how do we introduce that to the limitations that we have and work around those limitations to go back to our capabilities and execute the mission as stated by our mission statement and execute the mission that is given to us by our higher level commander. Tactics talk is one of the most important parts of a squadron's life cycle, because it being more of an informal situation, it gives the most junior person in the room just as much of a platform to ask questions and add input as the highest ranking commander in the room. It's what we call hats off. Okay? You wear your rank on your hat. There's no rank, there's no hats in that room. It is an open form. Now, of course, you can't be a jackass and say, you go to hell, that's stupid. But it is an opportunity for that newest second lieutenant to say, I don't get it. Why would we do XYZ when they do ABC? That is kind of escaping me. In a safer environment. Because in a formal training environment, a lot of it is because I said so, LT. So shut up and write it down. In a tactics talk, there's no time limit. There's no constraints besides standard decorum and customs and courtesies, but it is the opportunity to address things and to really talk them out and provide explanation throughout the meeting and throughout the squadron, and to share that knowledge and to make sure that there's a global understanding of what we're talking about, and to make sure that your in squadron instructors understand the information that we're going to be putting out as we go through the in-house training process for things. And some of the greatest things you're going to learn are going to come from the experience of others inside a tactics talk, as we talk and we share. And on a lesser note, it's a chance as somebody who likes attention to be up in the front of the room, and everybody's got to listen to everything you have to say. It's awesome. It's a great opportunity, and it's a great environment. And the reason I named this channel Tactics Talk is because that's how I want to present information. Not in the unreasonable terms of intelligence and technical beeps and squeaks, because I want to present this information like I did this, in a story narrative format that everybody can understand, where you guys can just respond with comments and I can respond back and explain, where you can share your thoughts and insights on it, where maybe everybody can fill their stein and have a drink while you're watching, and it can be nice and relaxed and be formally informal, where you can learn something and hopefully have a good time, and we can share some knowledge. And again, since I'm doing these videos where most of it comes from questions from you guys, it will be almost like a back and forth, where you guys want information and I give you information. So that is sort of a little very abbreviated view. Yeah, that was abbreviated, of a weapons and tactics talk, and why I named this channel Tactics Talk, and where it comes from and how it works. If you guys have any further questions, you can just throw it in the comments, or you can send me an email. It's in the video description. For any further information on how that works, or what is weapons school about, I will talk about it all day long. Or, you know, if you have another topic you want talked about in our tactics talk. So, thanks for giving me the opportunity to explain the coolest training environment in the entire world to you. I encourage you to do a little research on your own. Look up United States Air Force Weapons School, 57th Wing, Nellis Air Force Base. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. The beer light is on. You're released from this briefing. Carry on.